thought 7 and I thought 5, but there are 4. 4 worlds, 4 dimensions of reality, 4 worlds of creation. But before we can even go to that space, we have to like kind of look at the basics of Kabbalah, which is Kabbalah actually means received, to receive. Like Kabbalat Shabbat means the receiving of the Shabbat. It's from the same word. Lekabel is to receive. And this is like this esoteric received knowledge that, so what is Kabbalah?
That's the alarm.
What is Kabbalah as you understand it? Let's start with that. So who can tell me what you think Kabbalah is? Somebody. Nobody dares? Claudia, are you?
I'll take a guess.
Okay.
Okay,
Claudia?
I'm willing to go out there. It's like mystical view of Judaism, mystical teachings of Judaism.
So when you say yes, and when you say mystical, what do you mean? Because we throw that word around a lot, mystical, mysticism, but what are we actually, what do we mean by that? What does mystical mean? What do you mean by that? Do you,
I guess received in a, not sure. I mean, the word that comes to mind is otherworldly, but that's not what it is. But, you know, I know the mystics had a bit of a more, not ascetic, but attuning with the creator, with God, and, you know, in forms, I suppose, of like meditation and, you know, practices of this nature to just tune into and receive teachings.
okay, anybody? Yes, thank you. Anybody else want to take a stab at what do we mean when we say mysticism, mystical? Anybody? So it says Kabbalah, this is what mysticism and Kabbalah is concerned with questions of good and evil, death and the afterlife, and the spiritual aspects of existence. It is basically about questions of how to connect with God, what is the next world? It's everything out of this world in Kabbalah, not in the material world, but in the spiritual world, and having to do with the soul and God and how to connect to God. So that's what mysticism means in Jewish mysticism. And it answers questions, or it ponders questions like, why is there good and evil? Why is there suffering? Why did God create the world? How do we connect with God? You know, where is God? All of these very deep questions that have nothing to do with our material, well, suffering does. These questions that we need answers to, that affect our lives and also connect us beyond ourselves. So one of the questions that they ask is, why did God create the world? And the Kabbalists, by the way, have answers, or they have a belief system that, you know, we could study this, you know, you could study it your whole life. Now, let me just preface this by saying, according to the Talmud, nobody should study Kabbalah until they're at least 40 years old and have studied everything else, like the Torah, the Talmud, everything, and are married. And usually they mean men, but they feel like you have to be rooted very deeply in this world, in reality, or you will go crazy. And you could still go crazy when you try to understand some of it. Sometimes I try to read it and I go, I have no idea what they're talking about. And sometimes I understand it. And they say it's a paradox because if it's too easy, then you're not really studying it because it's really hard to understand. Where do we first hear about Kabbalah or mysticism? There's a story in the Torah. If you've heard this, I'm sorry, I don't think everyone's heard it. About 4 rabbis, it says 4 rabbis went into the garden. Now, when they say garden, it's the Garden of Eden, or it means paradise. It means that they, in some way, reached into the heavenly heights, into the upper realms. And in rabbinical school, we discussed this. What does this mean? And one of them was Rabbi Akiba, and there were others, Shimon Bar Yochai and a couple others, but Rabbi Akiba is the most famous one. they probably fasted, meditated, maybe they took hallucinogens or something, but their goal was to, get out of their body and go to the next realm. And they say 4 went into the garden, 1 lost his mind, 1 killed himself, 1 left Judaism altogether, and 1 came back normal or came back enlightened, and that was Rabbi Akiva. So 3 of the 4 rabbis could not handle whatever the mystical experience was. And what were they going for? The very first description of a mystical experience is in the book of Ezekiel, in the prophets, chapter 1. Talks about, you've probably heard of it, that famous chariot that he saw in the sky that had wheels. It had 4 faces. It was going in 4 directions at one time. What does that mean? It had 4 faces of different animals, and it was in the sky, and he also saw the throne of God. Now, Ezekiel was a bit of a weirdo, in my opinion. I mean, he fasted for days on end. There's this one chapter where he's lying on his side for like a year, contemplating things. So, but he had this vision, and that vision is called chariot mysticism, because he saw the chariot. And if you remember, in the 70s or 80s, there was this book, Chariot of the Gods. It was a really popular book. Probably none of you remember it. Maybe Jeff remembers it. And it talked about, or Miriam, that it was actually a UFO that he saw, that there were like aliens who came down and helped establish civilization on Earth. But that was a big theory, like a Shirley Temple theory, Shirley Jackson McLean theory. So anyway, so that's called chariot mysticism. That's the original mystical experience that we see in the Bible. And then we go to the rabbis in the Talmud, and then it just keeps going on all the way till the 16th century, when the Lurianic mysticism in Kabbalah was written and created in Safat, the city of Safed or Safat in Israel. And so it was sort of a very underground thing that you had to sort of almost be initiated or invited to study. It wasn't like popular until the 20th century, when this author, Gershom Scholem, sort of wrote this book about Kabbalah, and it became more accessible. But even then, it's really hard to understand, because all of the references in Kabbalistic texts are to biblical or Talmudic other references. And if you don't know them, you can only get like the surface, but we're trying. Okay, so it also says that the point of Kabbalah is, through beliefs, idea, and action, to try to know the divine. And as much as, we want to, Abraham Joshua Heschel said that knowing God is like a fleeting moment. He didn't believe you could really know God on an ongoing level, that you would have these fleeting feelings of, oh my God, that was God or something. And we've all had those. We've all said, this is beyond reality, or beyond, every day there's something else going on, and it disappears. And Heschel says, when you try to grasp it, it dissipates. So it's, this is a vision of life with so much more meaning than just the everyday, what's here, the material world. It's a whole other way of looking at life. And okay, so that's one thing. Now, the core idea in Kabbalah is this idea of the Sefirot, or the broken vessels. So does anyone, before I talk about it, know what I'm talking about when I say Sefirot? Does anybody know what I'm saying? Okay, Penina. But you're muted. You're muted.
Got mail.
Unmute yourself. You're still muted.
The little microphone, Penina, that says mute, or it says unmute in the bottom left-hand corner. Make sure your arrow's over it and click. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. I learned that a long time ago, first of all, the historic background of this whole thing of the Kabbalah was developed in Russia because life in reality was so unbearable. And the whole Hasidic movement was born because they had to look for some kind of spiritual explanation or some kind of a direction to hold on to their belief, because life at that time was horrible for them, with the pogroms and all the hate and the...
But Kabbalah was before then. It was in Israel in the 1500s.
Right, but the whole idea...
But it's in the Hasidic movement for sure, yes.
Right, okay. So the Sefirot was supposed to be kind of like steps that you have to accomplish in your life to understand even why we are believing in God, or why we are holding on to our religion, or a way to hold on to the religion. So if they couldn't kind of like depend on the reality around them, because it was too brutal for them, they looked for some kind of a spiritual reality that will justify their beliefs and justify them to believe into this whole Judaism thing. So in order to, so this idea of the tzaddikim was developed. Who is a real tzaddik? So they have to go through those sefirot to become a tzaddik, to consider to be a righteous man, a real righteous man. So I was always looking at it more in a practical way, that it was something that they have to depend on in order to literally survive spiritually and get some kind of a, how would I say, comfort, to be in a zone, to live, to continue living the way that they wanted to. And so the sefirot are that you have to be a tzaddik, and you're supposed to do a lot of good in the world. And every time that you do good, you go up into those sefirot, which are called countings. It's like steps.
Right.
And when you
so that is one, and definitely one understanding. They're also considered emanations from God that he gave to the soul. But before I do that, what I really meant to talk about first is the breaking of the vessels. So there's this idea in Kabbalah that God poured all of the light and all of the creation and all the goodness into, some say 10 vessels, some say one huge vessel that he was going to give to humanity, and it exploded. This vessel, and they say, think of it like a vase or a cup or a group of vases, metaphorical, so spiritual, exploded all over the world. And now it is what the substance of life, the substance of material life and emotional life are these shards that had the light in them, the broken vessels. And our job is to take every shard and uncover the light. Some say there's a klipa, there's like a pod around the light, that the shard is enclosed, and inside is the light. And this idea of unlocking or revealing the light in all the pieces of living. So in connecting to what Penina is saying, meaning that everything has light in it, even bad things, even illness, even COVID, even fires. According to the Kabbalistic view, they all are pieces of light that are covered up with dirt or enclosure, and we have to find a way to crack it open and reveal the light. And that's how we repair the world, is we collect these shards and we open up the light, we reveal the light. And light is a big thing in Judaism. It's the first thing God created in the creation story. We're supposed to be the light of the nations. And now the Kabbalists are saying that everything in existence contains light, and it's our job to find the light.
I remember that my teacher compared it to an onion. An onion is strong and it's bitter. Mm-hmm. So you need to keep on taking these layers away till you get to that sweet
part. So
I'll give you a different picture as well.
Yes.
If you look at the soul, and it is covered with schmutz or whatever you want to say, the act of a good deed is taking the soul, which is akin to a huge diamond, and creating a new facet in the surface of that soul so that more light can be transmitted. So the metaphor of a diamond and the ability to refine a diamond so that its light is released is the idea of good works, of good deeds, of all of these issues that raise our level in Kabbalah, the next level, the 7 steps.
We're going to talk about the steps in a second, but it says here, the shards produced by the shattering are the stuff of creation. The divine light is embedded within every aspect of creation, and the task of humans is to release the divine that resides in all creation through good deeds, like you said, Jeff, righteous living, and spiritual acts. And just a second, I looked at something else. Okay. Okay, so it says that according to the Kabbalah, every person is responsible for breaking open the pieces to release the light contained within, because everything, as I said, in the world contains divine light. By integrating the shattered vessel metaphor into one's consciousness, all life and all existence has the potential for sanctity through the release of divine sparks from the divine light inside. And this is a very unique idea of the Kabbalists. They're saying that this was an accident, that God is flawed, and that God needs humanity to finish the creation, the vision God had to create the world by collecting this light. It wasn't supposed, it's called the Great Catastrophe, that it broke. And so it says, by revealing the divine light that's hidden, the Kabbalist participates in the correcting of the world, leading to a time when God will be obvious and known to all people. And if you think of this even on a secular level, the more we bring light into the world, the more divine, holy, beautiful life can be. And right now, literally, the skies are dark, you know, with smoke. There's light is being blotted out on so many levels. And as Jews and as a potential Kabbalist students here, Kabbalists, we need to be doing that. And so, and that is why the Kabbalists like say blessings on everything. Like when they eat food, they say a bracha, a blessing, because they say they're releasing the light from the food. When you do hamotzi lechem min haaretz, you're actually opening up and releasing light, because everything is a blessing. And by looking at the food as a blessing and treating it as a blessing, you're releasing light. So you think of prayers in a whole different way as sort of releasing light into the world. Yes, Jan.
Are those the same blessings that the Orthodox say over each food?
Yeah.
Each bit of food?
This is only Orthodox. All this teaching is basically Orthodox. I mean, I just call it Jewish. I'm not diluting it in any way. This is for everyone. I believe you should teach from the tradition, and then we can decide, well, that doesn't work for me.
No, I just didn't know if they were the same exact prayers that you were talking
Oh
about.
yeah, absolutely. We all say the same exact prayers. Yes. Yeah, just a second, Talia. And then.
So do the Orthodox believe that God is flawed and it's our job to complete through the loving acts of kindness?
I think it's not, yeah, maybe. I mean, some do, some don't. If they're into the Kabbalistic thing, they wouldn't say flawed. They would see God needs us to complete the task, and maybe they would say that was intentional. You know, the Kabbalists say this was a mistake. They would probably say that was intentional because this is part of our refining of our soul by completing the task, which is another way to look at it. It's our job, whether God made a mistake or God intentionally said, I'm leaving a little bit unfinished. You know, that's like when you write a Torah and then at the very end, you don't finish it. And then people come around and you say a blessing, and it's like a big event when you complete writing a Torah. The scribe writes all of it by himself until the end, and then you can actually celebrate. Perhaps, the idea is that God created the world, but left something undone for us. This is part of our purpose here. So could be either way. Anyone else? Jeff, you wanted to say something?
I think I was going to echo Talia, because the concept of God as fallible is the antithesis of thinking of God. And we make rationalizations that say, well, our mind is too small and we don't have a history long enough in our mind to experience the plan of God. So we're constantly rationalizing, but certainly we can't have a God who is fallible. It's the antithesis of the meaning of God.
Well,
We don't
a lot of
understand.
people felt that. There was a whole philosophy of that after the Holocaust. So and that's the thing about Judaism.
So
5 opinions, 10, 100 opinions. But,
how
so
does the chart of Sefirot fit into this whole?
we're going to go there right now. One second. Susan.
Yes, we were talking about Tzimtzum, God contracting and to make room, and then the vessels shattering, the shards, and these are and leading to these Sefirot. And I would say less than God not being fallible or being fallible. There's a concept of God being omnipotent, able, which is a little different. That God is not all powerful, and God needs us. And there's conflict between God and our minds about God being omnipotent or omniscient and benevolent. So that leads to other discussions. So God here is not omnipotent. And we can believe they're two conflicting.
Well, that's the thing about Kabbalah and Judaism. Also, it could be, when God was creating the world, God, I don't know. It seems soon, by the way, is this idea, if God filled the universe, how did he make room for the world? It's like God contracted and made room for the world. Perhaps some idea says it just was too powerful. This essence was too powerful to be contained in the container, and it exploded. This is, a Kabbalistic, Lurianic vision of the sparks, the divine sparks all over the world. So we can accept it or not, but it's very, very interesting. But also they talk about these, and now we're going to look at the handout that I gave you, these, what they call channels of divine plenty that are sent down into our souls or into our beings, or their qualities or emanations of God that we can, there's so many different visions of these. Sefirot means countings or qualities, that these different emanations or qualities are all about the soul and how to exist and in our characters. And we have to find a way to balance them. And it's this spiritual idea of our essence through these 10 emanations, we can call them. So if people have the handout I gave you, if you don't, I'm going to read it to you, or somebody can read. Does somebody have the handout? Anyone have the handout? Okay. Roy, I see you have the handout. Why don't you read from, just read the whole thing from the beginning, a fundamental notion in Kabbalah.
A fundamental notion in Kabbalah is the belief that the world is created and sustained by 10 channels, Sefirot of divine plenty. The Sefirot are complex, each with many different meanings and gradation. 2 of them, is it Keter or Keter?
Keter.
Keter and Da'at are interchangeable depending on whether the Sefirot are seen from God's viewpoint or from the human perspective. The lower 7 Sefirot directly act on the world, while those Sefirot above them are abstract aspects of consciousness, and they each have a biblical personality associated with them. These associations work in 2 ways. One can understand more about the biblical figures through the Sefirot connected with them, and one can learn more about the nature of each Sephira when seeing its corresponding biblical figure.
Okay. So who wants to read the first one? Susan Ehrlich, or first.
Sure. Keter, a crown, is divine will and the source of all delight and pleasure. Keter contains all the powers that activate the soul.
So Keter really comes from God. This is like nothing in us. It's like the divine emanations or whatever energy coming into us, and it activates our soul. It's the divine spark, the thing that makes us alive, that makes us have what I call our holy potential, comes from Keter. So all of these are like these energies or channels coming from God. Some of them we have some control over, some of them we just have. So read the next one, Susan.
Chokhmah, or wisdom, is the intuitive grasp and intuitive knowledge. It's also that which distinguishes and creates.
So this is just, I'd say, Chokhmah, wisdom. Wisdom is like it's your intuition in a way. It's knowledge that you just know. You just know it. And also it's creation. So it's things that you have a new idea. It's comes from that level of your brain or your soul or whatever. So that's Chokhmah. And then I'm just going to do the other. There's three kinds of knowledge or of cognitive understanding. The next one is called Bina, and that's the analytical and synthetic power of the mind. So you have an idea, that's Chokhmah. Then in Bina, you say, is this real or not? You analyze it. Is this possible? Can I do this? And then there's Dot, which is knowledge. So there's wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Dot is the accumulation of that which is known. And then you come to a conclusion. This is not doable, or this is doable, or this is real, or this is not real, or this is possible, or this is a fantasy. So those are the three levels of knowledge that we're getting from God, we're saying. And then with this ability, we're able to then live in the world. And then the next seven are, well, two of them, yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, Dot, some of them are interchangeable, but the next seven are considered how we use that knowledge and the divine energy to live in our lives. Does anybody have any questions? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Are these called the Sefirot?
These are the Sefirot. Keter is the divine will or the crown that comes from God. And then there's three kinds of knowledge: wisdom, understanding, and there's wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Three kinds of perception, I would say: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Wisdom is sort of intuitive. Your understanding is analyzing it, and then the knowledge is deciding, how to use it. Now you're going to use it. So the next Sefirah, Susan, why don't you read it?
Hesed, our loving kindness, is the irrepressible impulse to expand. It's the source of love, the inclination toward things, and that which gives of itself. The biblical personality associated with Hesed is Abraham.
So I guess, okay, so now there's this idea that you can have Chesed, which is, loving kindness, but you can have too much Chesed. You can have, it can be when you, and now there's this whole idea of your soul, your character, and it goes with Musar, this idea of working on yourself. You have to have a balance between these different Sefirot. So loving kindness be good, but if you allow yourself to be walked all over on, or, you're basically being used, manipulated, you're always giving, you're never getting, even to the point of physical abuse, and you still stay there because you think, I'll forgive them. That's too much Chesed. And I think it's interesting that they say Chesed is Abraham, because personally, I think Abraham had too much Chesed. because
Yeah.
just without a word was willing to sacrifice his son. He was giving to such a degree. Now, I'm sure the Kabbalists think, oh, that was so beautiful. But personally, I think that was too far in terms of giving. You can give too much. But chesed in itself is beautiful. It's loving kindness. Does anybody have any questions or?
Think about that story of the Akedah. It
Yeah.
really isn't true. It isn't true for this reason, because prior to the actual Akedah, he is told that his son will be the source of the generations to come.
That's true.
So implicitly, he knows that this sacrifice is an act of observance that he must perform, that it will not happen.
So that's
God
an
has
interpretation.
told him.
Or
Yeah, well,
I like
that's
that,
human.
that. So we say, was God testing Abraham? Or I've said this, is God testing Abraham, or was Abraham testing God? Going, you really going to do this? You really going to make me do this? Let's see. So that's such a complex story, but they think that this kind of giving, this abundance of giving, we can see why they picked Abraham. Okay, does anybody else have one to read Gevurah? Does anyone have the thing? Okay, okay, Penina?
Gvura is restraint and concentration. It's the inward withdrawal of forces and the energy source of hate, fear, terror, justice, restraint, and control. The biblical personality associated with Gvura is Isaac.
Okay, so Gevurah is strength, and it can go all the way to the extreme and have hate, fear, and terror, but it can also have justice, restraint, and control. So when most Kabbalists put chesed and Gevurah on the same level, you have a balance between giving and control and strength and justice. You can't go to one end or the other, and they say you have too much chesed, you have too much Gevurah, you're working for a balance. Why do you think that they connected Isaac to that? The opinions? I don't know. I mean, I may have an opinion, but I don't have an answer. So I would love to hear your theory of why would they connect control, well, fear and terror. I mean, Claudia?
Well, I can see fear and terror.
From the Akedah, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I'm not too sure about the restraint. Well, I can see the restraint too, because in the same story, Isaac did not protest.
Right.
Control, I don't know. Is there anything further along in Isaac's life that could make us think of control?
I find him weak, personally.
Yeah, I do too. Pardon me.
Susan?
I do too, but maybe they're associating it with his like Abraham did, bargaining for the wells, and didn't he deal with what was the Hittites among them and make discussions of wealth?
Yeah, but he and Abraham gave their wives to Pharaoh instead of, protecting them. So
yeah, that's true.
And lied about it.
I don't know.
They
And
lied
about it
They lied.
for his own salvation.
That's right. So I don't know. I mean, it's so interesting to see. But restraint or fear and terror, because when he was on that altar and his father had the knife of it. Okay, Tiferet. Tiferet is, Miriam, yes, please. And unmute yourself.
Okay. Now you see, to me, I'm confused. Because Pirkei Avot says, Esahu Gibor, HaKoveshek Yitzro. Who is the mighty one? Who is the strong one? He who conquers his Yetzer Hara. He who conquers his wrong and bad inclinations.
Right.
Therefore, why are they translating the word Gevurah, which really has the word strength in it, as restraint?
Conquest could be
as
conquest.
restraint. And you said justice, restraint, and control. Whereas the word Gevurah is a strong man. Was Isaac a strong man in the Bible?
I don't think so.
wasn't.
Gevurah is
So that's why I'm
translated.
confused.
Yeah, Gevurah is translated here as strength. Gevurah is strength. But they're saying, I guess there's a kind of strength to restrain yourself, to,
Maybe that's even a greater strength.
yeah,
Also,
well, there's
Restrain yourself could be a greater strength.
could be a great, I think too much Gevurah is hate, fear, and terror, because you know you can go extreme. They talk about going in either direction. If it's moderated with chesed, it's restraint and it's justice and it's control. So you know, self-control. So you're not just you giving everything away. You're not becoming a martyr. You're not becoming a victim. So there's two sides, but I don't know why they pick Isaac. I don't get it. I agree with you.
he made peace with Ishmael.
Ishmael, because
They were rivals because Abraham sent Ishmael away, but he made peace with him, Isaac.
he did make peace with him. That's a good point. So in case you don't know, you know, Abraham had an Egyptian wife, Hagar. He had a son, Ishmael, that Sarah felt was a threat to Isaac, and God condoned this idea of sending Ishmael and Hagar out into the desert, where they made their way and ended up doing all right. They were saved by God, and then they ultimately, Ishmael got married and had children. And when Abraham died, Ishmael and Isaac met at the grave, the cave where he was buried, and they grieved together as brothers. So they must have made peace, is what, you know, Penina is saying. So that's a good point. That may be the reason that he got Gevurah. He overcame whatever emotions he was told he should have about Ishmael and felt his own feelings and made peace. That's a good one. I like that. Tiferet, beauty. Tiferet is harmony, truth, compassion, and beauty. It's the balance of the powers of attraction and repulsion. So it's the balance. It's beauty, truth, Tiferet. And the biblical personality is Jacob. So why Jacob? His opinion, why Jacob? Come on, what do we know about Jacob? He was the lover. He was the lover. He loved Rachel. He worked 7 years for Rachel for her beauty, and he was in love with her. And then when Rachel's father tricked him and married off Leah, her older sister, to him, he said, I'll work another 7 years for Rachel. So he loved her. However, we could say that he had too much Tiferet, because why? He had too much love because he favored Joseph over his other sons to an extreme, and that ended up causing all these problems. So you could have too much Tiferet and become start having favoritism with your children, and then all kinds of problems arise. Okay, so these are all the Sefirot, or these are all the qualities of the soul. This is what you should understand. These are the qualities of that the Kabbalists believe are in us, that we need to balance and acknowledge and live with. So we have all the different kinds of knowledge and wisdom. We have loving kindness, we have strength, we have beauty. And now the next one is Netzach. Who would like to read Netzach?
Well, before we get to that, again, I'm a little troubled. Some of the things applied to Jacob. Harmony, truth, he was a deceiver.
I agree, but they're being very, selective in what they're choosing. This is the Kabbalist. This isn't me. I agree.
I know that. But back to Isaac for one moment, when Penina suggested with Ishmael, I don't know that there was a conflict with Ishmael, but he buried his father after knowing that his father tried to kill him. And
That's true.
We have no other instance of a dialogue between them.
Right.
And his mother died. And And the Midrash says she died when she learned what had happened. And
what she thought had happened. She thought he had been sacrificed. Right.
So maybe that's just a control and restraint when he goes with Ishmael to bury the guy who tried to kill him.
That's good too. I mean, they don't explain, they just associate. And with Jacob, yes, he was a lover, but he also was a deceiver. We know that. And then he wasn't very good with his children. He had favoritism. So I agree with you. Yes, Merle.
Oh, I'm thinking when we sit here and we talk about, what Jacob had and didn't have, or his good qualities and his bad qualities, and anyone else that they're guiding us to, that they think is the example. I think they want us to debate not just in these characters, but in ourselves as to where our qualities fit within each level of the Sefirot.
I love that. I think you're absolutely right, because these are supposed to be in us and we're looking at them. And as it said in the beginning, you can understand more about the biblical figures, and you can also understand more about yourself. And everybody is flawed and complex, just like we are. So I agree with you. That's a very good point.
This exercise that we're doing right now is an exact replica of what we need to do when we spend 49 days counting the Omer. And in Reform Judaism, there's this chart. You may or may not be able to see it.
Yeah.
But it reflects a square in which you do the 7 weeks and you add each quality to a different characteristic of these qualities and think through what the effects are in total.
Well, I actually have that whole list, and it has questions. Like, for example, you have the first week is like, if you have a week of Chesed, then there's Gevura in Chesed and Tiferet in Chesed, and
right. Exactly. Each of them linked together in this hatched chart. And it's an interesting exercise that we did this year at my suggestion with another group. And it became quite a hot exercise to do because it really reflects a lot of your thinking about
it's kind
each
of like
these qualities.
Therapy on yourself.
It's self-therapeutic. But
yeah, we can. Go ahead. 1 second.
Can I say
1 minute. 1 minute. Merle, and then Miriam, and then
just talk.
So
Merle.
Not just what Jeff said, but I think this is part of Elul too. That we're thinking of where we're gonna.
Same exercise.
What did we do that was wrong this year that we need to improve? It's like self-introspection.
Absolutely.
It's the same.
Just thinking of the definition of the words and how the qualities of those words reflect within you. Are you charitable? Are you chesed, loving people?
Are you strong enough? Are you?
Yeah.
Are you compassionate enough? Okay, Miriam.
I pass. It's okay.
Are you pass? Pnina.
Okay. I'm going back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
When they were put in Gan Eden,
yes,
it says there, it shows you that human beings received all these qualities that we are talking about now to begin with.
Right.
They had to make a choice. She was enticing him. He said no, then he did, then God punished them. So we were all given all those choices to do all those wonderful things or not. And through the years, with whatever happened in our history, through the whole Bible and the characters that we see actually that what God gave Adam and Eve, it's working or not with whatever it is that those people chose to do, or how to live or how to behave. So comes the Hasidut now and reinforcing, but put it more like to reach the perfectness. This is where you get the crown. This is where you're supposed to be a king in your own life, that you have these relationships and responsibilities and choices and actions, that you all can be kings and you can all be queens and you can all do all those things, but you need to choose it. You need to decide to do this.
So I completely agree with you, except Eve did not tempt him. I think she shared, and he did not say no. He took it right away.
I agree.
I have a whole different view of Eve. I go, good for you, Eve, that you wanted him a knowledge and you didn't want to be an infantilized child for your whole existence. So we can talk about that.
Wait.
Okay.
That's.
But I don't see her. She did not.
Wow.
She did not tempt him. She shared.
Wow.
And he took without a word.
Okay.
Because I've studied
Can't we
this in
blame
detail.
the women for something? My God,
No,
it's time
you
you
cannot.
took some blame.
Yes, we'll take blame for all the beauty, love, nurturing, sustenance, agriculture, arts. We'll take blame for that.
Right.
Even though she tried to know about good and bad.
That's right. What's
Well, I
wrong
mean,
with that? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, choices.
That's a positive.
Choices that people make.
That's
Exactly.
right. I agree. Okay, Netzach, victory is the source of conquest and the capacity for overcoming. This is discipline,
Mhm.
urge to get things done. And of course, I love it. The personality with Netzach is Moses. So that one finally makes sense to me.
Right.
That it's a kind of a victory, but it's a self-victory. That's what I like. It's a self-conquest of your evil inclination, as Miriam said, your Yetzer Hara. It's a it's this urge to overcome your obstacles and to complete your tasks. So now, the lower we get, the more human it seems, the more, recognizable. Okay, Hod, splendor. Does somebody else want to read Hod? Does anyone have it? Hod means persistence or holding on. It's the power to repudiate obstacles and persevere. It's also the source of humility.
Ah, that's
Beautiful.
the best quality of all.
And the biblical personality associated with is, anybody have a guess? Who that would be, if you might have it in your paper, but otherwise?
Moses.
Aaron. Aaron, Moses' brother.
Are you going home?
Moses is victory, it's conquest and capacity for overcoming, and Hod is Aaron. Okay, somebody who's talking, just mute yourself. Okay, and then the next, we have two more. Yesod, foundation, is the vehicle or the carrier from one thing or one condition to another. It's the power of connection and the capacity to build bridges, to make connections and relate to others. And the personality of Yesod is Joseph, which also makes sense to me because he made so many connections everywhere he went. He found a way to relate to people and to succeed. Even when he was in prison, first he was a servant, then he was in prison, then with Pharaoh, even with his brothers. So that makes sense. So if we look at the lower ones, we have loving kindness, strength, beauty, which means compassion, Netzach, which means overcoming our conquering our problems and overcoming, Hod, which is persistence and humility, perseverance and humility. Now, connection. So these are all qualities in our soul that we want to work on. And then finally, Malchut, kingdom. Malchut is sovereignty, rule, and the ultimate receptacle. It is the realization of potential in the divine presence. In other words, it comes from the crown. It comes all the way down to you where you accept it. So you're the receptacle. God is the person pouring in these qualities to us, and we're the receptacle. And the personality is David, which is interesting because because his descendant is supposed to be the Messiah. So in that respect, but King David, as we studied in Women's Torah study, is quite a controversial character. He was good and bad. He was a very mixed person, but so are we. Maybe that's why it is. So does anyone have, those are the Sefirot or the essences of Kabbalah. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Talia.
Why are none of the examples of that women?
Women. Why do you think?
And wrote this too.
That's right.
The Garden of Eden lives and is well.
Yes. So, but I actually now today, so if you remember, maybe you don't know, there's this tradition at Sukkot that every day another biblical figure's visits you, their ghost or whatever, like Abraham, and they list all of these men, but now they've added their women as well. So women and men visit women in the sukkah. They're called, what's the name of that word? Ushpizin, which means like these spiritual guests. And there's a hilarious Israeli movie called Ushpizin about Sukkot, and was actually shot in Mea Sharim, a really funny movie about that. Okay, so we're not going to get to the four worlds today because it's a whole other thing, but I will talk to you about some blessings that the Kabbalists find are very, very important, because I thought that would be interesting. Now, where is it? The blessings. These are the blessings that the Kabbalists find the most significant blessings. The one that you say in the morning, Modeh ani lefanecha. This is a prayer that you go, thank you, God. I thank you, God, for returning my soul to me, and with compassion, and that I'm very faithful to you. But it's Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai b'kayom shechazarta bi nishmati v'chemla rabba b'emunatecha. And it's also in the prayer book, but it's like every morning you're just supposed to thank God that you woke up, that your soul was returned. This idea like in dreams, or that you went out of your body or into the next world. You don't know where you are when you're sleeping, but you thank God that your soul was returned to you. And then the one that we say, La'asok b'divrei Torah, is also considered a very important prayer in Kabbalistic terms. And then, of course, the Shema is very important. And I don't know if I told you, I actually wrote a big paper about the Shema once. I was doing a research in it. After the Holocaust, when there was this rabbi who was, the Shema is something you're supposed to say in the morning and before you go to sleep. There's the nighttime Shema. And actually in the classical Orthodox nighttime Shema, you ask to be protected from demons, because there was this belief in demons, that the demons you'll be protected from demons. If you ever look it up, you'll see that. But anyway, so this was a very common prayer that Jewish parents said with their little children. Every night they would sit in, religious for sure, the Shema. And after the Holocaust, when a lot of children were hidden and sent away, there was this rabbi who went around Poland saying the Shema out loud. And when little children would turn or cry or say mama or whatever, he knew was a Jewish child. And that's how he rescued all these children that had been sort of scattered and hidden during the war from the Shema. And we also know that Rabbi Akiva said it right before he died, and he was martyred by the Romans. And so from that time on, Rabbi Akiva lived he died in like 170 or 166 CE. We know that part of the vidui that we talked about, the confession before you die, you say the Shema. So, or whenever, so this prayer is it's become almost like a good luck prayer, a mystical prayer. It kind of, you feel this connection that it's not just a prayer, but it's connecting you to God in this really deep way. The next prayer that is very important is the priestly blessing, which is in the Torah, that God, we say it all the time to you. You can say it. It used to only be the priests could say it. And as you know, they would do it with their hands like this. And that's where Leonard Nimoy got this thing. May God, may God bless you and watch over you. May God shine his countenance on you and be gracious to you. May God lift you up, his countenance, or there's many translations of this, and give you peace. So that's a big one. Then there's one on hearing bad news. This is the one you say at funerals. Baruch Dayan Ha'amet, blessed is the true judge. And that is very Kabbalistic, in that even in the worst times, there's some good in there that you have to find. And then they say all the time, this is what they're saying, Baruch Hashem, which means, thank God, thank God. We're thanking God. And we know Hashem means the name, doesn't even mean God's name. So these are like the Kabbalistic blessings, and this is our intro to Kabbalah. And I don't want to get into the four worlds till next time, because it's it's a whole other discussion. Yes, Susan.
Susan, yes, would you repeat the ha'amet, that there's a
Baruch Dayan Ha'amet. Blessed is the true judge. And you say that when you tear your ribbon at a funeral, that's what you say, Baruch Dayan Ha'amet. Blessed is the true judge. That you even bless God when bad things happen, which is very hard for us, for anybody to do that, and to try to find the light, the divine sparks in everything. So I want to wish you a Shana Tova. I hope you don't forget to get around challah, apples and honey. Watch our services, which we did in our robes in the sanctuary in August. August 10th is when we did them. So I haven't seen it either. So I hope they're good. I'm sure they will be.
Do we have class next week, Susan?
Yeah, we'll have class. So it'll be, there's Friday night, there's Saturday morning, and Sunday morning is second day Rosh Hashanah, which I did at Ermis. Much more, you know, like if you ever came to my second day, it was much more casual, it was more intimate. I hope you'll watch it. It's with Rabbi Nickerson and both cantors singing some great music. And I haven't seen that one either, but I'm supposed to see that one soon. But that one should be very nice, and that's Sunday morning. And I guess once you watch it, you can watch it once the time passes, you don't have to watch it exactly at that time. I think you can watch it whenever you want. So I wish you a sweet, happy New Year.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Rabbi, last year, your second day was so beautiful that it gave my husband and I, plus friends that we had lunch with, had beautiful lunch afterwards by courtesy of the shul. But it gave me such sustenance, Susan, that I will have to keep it for this year. It will work for me. It will help me.
Thank you. I even say in the beginning, I say we can't have lunch together this year, but next year, hopefully we'll all be there.
Susan, they have all been wonderful.
Stay strong, Rabbi. I'll be
You too,
around to
everybody
vex
be
you
strong.
next year.
See you in 5781, right? Or
Thank you.
82.
Just a few days.
82. What?
I think it's 56781.
Yeah, 5781. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for everything.
Have a wonderful
And not so